What is the shadow self? We hear this term a lot in the self-improvement world, the spiritual community, and in this video I'm going to discuss exactly what the shadow self is, especially if you are new to all of this. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you are new around here, my name is Christina and I help empower people on their spiritual and healing journey so they can have a more fulfilling and purposeful driven life. So the shadow self is actually not what you think. The shadow is a kind of split personality. It's our darker side. And Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, was the founder of analytical psychology, and he was the one that developed the term the shadow. And he did his own extensive research on himself to really get to know his subconscious mind, his dark, deep desires that reside in our shadow that we may not be aware of because it's in our subconscious or in the unconscious. And so the shadow self is basically this part of ourselves that we may not be consciously aware of. So think of it just like Peter Pan. He had, in that scene, his shadow actually got cut off from him. And if you have watched that, you will remember the scene of him chasing his shadow around the room. Peter Pan's shadow had its own personality. It was trying to run away from him and he was trying to bring it back. And so we can think of our own shadow in that exact same concept. So our shadow self is that other side of our personality that we don't show. And when I started going through my spiritual awakening, I was in some Facebook groups, some spiritual Facebook groups, and I would see posts about the shadow and shadow work. And I was like, oh my God, what is this concept? What is this shadow? And there'd be pictures of like memes and like things that were kind of like seemed like scary almost. It actually made me frightened of what the shadow was. And the shadow is actually nothing to be frightened of. And that's the thing, I think most people think of it as, oh, it's this ghostly thing or it's this demonic thing that we have, and unfortunately it is not that. It's just part of our psyche, part of our fragmented self that we have shut away and denied and repressed into darkness. And we've repressed it into darkness away from our conscious mind because once upon a time you associated shame with that. And we associate shame with it because culture, society deems it as not acceptable. So then we end up creating this persona. We put this mask on, we become inauthentic, and then we repress and shut away that side of ourselves that is deemed shameful or unacceptable. And often we don't want to see those dark parts of ourselves. We don't want to face the shadow because it can feel uncomfortable. And the shadow only wants to be understood. We only fear what we don't understand. So of course, we're not going to want to face the shadow. And the shadow just needs to be seen and understood and integrated back into wholeness. So what I mean by this is that in our shadow, we have all of these different kind of aspects, personalities of ourselves that we shut away. Maybe it's an artistic version of yourself. Maybe it's your dark feminine, your dark masculine side of yourself that you shut away. Maybe it's the inner child that is stuck in emotional pain. And because we have all of these different aspects, it's about bringing it back into wholeness and integrating it into one, rather than operating from inauthenticity and not accepting those parts of ourselves that society has deemed as unacceptable and it's shameful. And we also don't like to see those darker parts of ourselves, because especially when we are going on our healing journey, when we're going through that spiritual awakening, we kind of get stuck in the trap of the love and light. When we first awaken, we get stuck in almost the New Age community, and there's nothing wrong with that, but New Age love and light can really stop us from discovering the true divine self, discovering the true spirituality, because it focuses heavily a lot on love and light and just being in a high vibration, and seeing things that are heavier and denser as negative, that we should be bypassing it and remain positive all of the time. So often these kinds of people refuse to see the darkness. But light cannot exist without dark. There's always going to be a shadow when there is light. So this means to really embody your light, you also have to embody your darkness as well. This means loving, accepting those shadow parts of ourselves. And the shadow self is not something that we can ignore and repress. It's actually a part of you. It's a part of you. So when I said there's no darkness without light, there's both dark and light, both light and the shadow within you. Always, we all have our deep, dark desires that we don't express, that we may be consciously aware of, and some that we may not be consciously aware of as well. So the shadow is just part of ourselves that we have denied and shut away because we've associated with shame for a long time. And then we don't show that side because we perceive it as shame. The ego forms the identity with the more acceptable side of ourselves, and we continue the persona of love and light in authenticity. And we don't know really fully how to be ourselves because the ego has accepted this identity of who we are, when there's actually two sides of ourselves that we all have and that we all must integrate to really get to know ourselves. Self-realization cannot happen until the integration of the shadow can happen, because we won't be able to fully progress and ascend, because we'll keep spiritually bypassing, because we're not integrating to wholeness and oneness from within. So if we are constantly trying to shut away the darkness and only see the light, the love, the light, there's always going to be the duality. We're always going to just perceive everything as abundant and fairies and light and love. And to really transcend the shadow and to be love and light, we have to integrate into wholeness. So we really have to get to know ourselves on a psychological level to really ascend, to know the true self, to discover self-realization. We cannot progress in life or grow unless we begin to accept parts of ourselves that we are told are not acceptable, or we've associated shame with it. And with the shadow self, when we begin to actually integrate that, what we are doing is, rather than just being aware of it, we're actually allowing ourselves to embody that. So this is not about becoming aggressive or showing your dark side and it's about being wholeness and one from within. And so this may mean embodying sides of yourself that you have shut away. So for example, somebody that may be very extroverted may have that side of themselves which is very quiet and reserved, or somebody that's very angry and always just holding a lot of resentment and anger, they may actually, on the opposite side of that, be very sad and calm. They've shut away in their shadow. And that's usually the inner child part that's been put in our shadow. And another example of this could be somebody that's very shy or introverted, just like me. I'm an introverted person. Sometimes I just don't want to talk to people. I don't want to small talk. I don't give a shit about the weather or what you got up to on the weekend. I'd rather just not talk to you. I know that sounds rude, but that's where I've integrated boundaries and authenticity and that part of myself that can speak up and say, actually, hold on. I just don't want to talk to you. I don't want to come out. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I'm able to now, I've shifted my whole identity now and integrated that side of myself from my shadow that is more extroverted now. I can go live, do workshops, do things like that when, like, prior to all of my spiritual awakening and my healing journey, I'd shit my pants doing any live workshops, talking on YouTube like this. I'd have been too scared of what people might thought of me. Yes, I'm still like introverted in the sense of I don't want to talk to people sometimes. I like my own company. I have very few friends. And they have to be on the same wavelength with me. If they are too extroverted, I cannot handle it, because usually that means they're just not in the same frequency as me, and they're not going to get it from my point of view. We're not going to click, if that makes sense. So that's what I mean about the shadow side of things. It doesn't necessarily be dark and evil and corrupt, but those parts of ourselves do reside in our shadow. But there are also good aspects that we reside in the shadow self, because we have associated shame with it. Maybe your parents, your culture, religion has told you, oh, you can't do that. That is shameful. That is this, this, and this, and this, and this. They've brought you up in a way that you have purposely, you've had to push away parts of yourself. And now you don't really and now you're not really consciously aware of it, or you have that deep desire to really show that and be authentic, but you're still worried about the repercussions and the consequences of all of that. Which means there's still some like shadow work, inner work, and basically healing to do to overcome those fears. And so you can see here what the shadow self actually is. It's just a part of ourselves. It's the duality within. And when I say duality, I just mean opposites. So with the dark and the light. And the dark is the shadow. In the shadow, it's not always necessarily things like jealousy, envy, sexual deviancy. It's not all that type of stuff. We can find our gifts, our uniqueness, our purpose that is actually been shut away in the shadow. And it's all about just illuminating that, shining light on it and bring it back into wholeness, and you embody that version of yourself that is whole and complete. Then that's how you grow spiritually, personally as well, because we get to really know the true self, really know the subconscious and the psyche when we begin to do it, when we begin to do the inner work. But with the shadow, there is actually 3 kind of realms or sections that I like to discuss when I'm talking about doing shadow work or just the shadow in general. And the first one is conscious awareness. It's in your conscious awareness, you're aware of it. The second one is unconsciousness. It's kind of a surface level thing. And the third one is the subconscious, the deep subconscious things that you may be on autopilot that you are not aware of at all. And if you want to learn more about these 3 sections, that this is something that people do not tell you about the shadow self, check out this video next. Much love.